Hello and welcome to my latest video. So we are opening a new division, this division being super middleweight. Okay, so we will go through the career of the Celtic Warrior Steve Collins. So let us begin with his first slide on his main opponents, and of course he doesn't have the largest group. Steve Collins twice fought the Dark Destroyer Nigel Benn, new Hall of Famer for next year, twice beating him. He also twice fought and beat simply the best Chris Eubank, also fighting and losing to the great body snatcher Mike McCallum. Next up is Sumbu Kalambe, okay, an excellent middleweight fighter. Steve Collins fought him on one occasion, suffering a defeat, and he also lost to former champion Reggie Johnson. Next up is former briefly world champion, okay, Chris Pyatt, okay, from the UK. Used to snort when he punched. I always found it really funny when I was younger. Yeah, good evening, Martin. Good to see you, buddy. Back on the career videos, pal. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of these this year. So up next, okay, after Chris Pyatt, okay, is contender Tony Thornton, who Steve Collins also beat. He also beat former challenger Dan Morgan. And really, that covers the bulk of Steve Collins' main opponents. He had less than 40 fights, and like many modern fighters, okay, and you know, some modern fighters have deeper resumes in that tally, but some do not. So Steve Collins has 10 fights listed there, okay, he won 7 of those, lost 3 and drew 0. It's going to be a shocker when I go back to cover some careers I'm going to be covering over coming weeks and months who have huge careers compared to this one. So Steve Collins, okay, when we look at his KOs and rounds boxed, he scored 21 knockouts in his career. He scored 8 KOs in 3 rounds or less, and Steve Collins also scored 1 first round win. Now he scored 3 KOs against champions, 2 against Hall of Famers, 2 against pound for pound fighters, and Steve Collins scored 3 KOs against rated opponents. Now in rounds boxed, okay, Collins fought a total of 283. He fought 94 title fight rounds, and he fought totals of 75 rounds against champions, 22 against Hall of Famers, and 34 rounds against pound for pound fighters. Collins against rated opponents fought totals of 87 rounds against top 10 fighters, 70 rounds against top 3 fighters, and 12 rounds against ring champions. So there is Collins' KOs and rounds boxed. Yeah, I remember Pyatt doing that were snorting thing. Yeah, every punch. When I was younger, I used to think, well, why do some boxers do that and others don't? It's fighters breathing into it, but yeah, it can sound funny sometimes. So let us go on to the slide against champions for Collins. He had 8 fights against champions, scoring 5 wins with 3 losses and no draws. Steve Collins beat 3 individual champions. They were Nigel Benn, Chris Eubank and Chris Pyatt, and he scored knockouts over 2 of those. He certainly didn't knock out Chris Eubank, who was one tough fighter, but he did score stoppage wins over Nigel Benn and Chris Pyatt. So Steve Collins did score stoppages over 2 of the 3 champions he defeated. Big shout out to Mr. James in the chat as well. Mr. James 810, sorry, in the chat. So there's Collins' slide against champions. When we go on to his slide against Hall of Famers, Steve Collins has 3 fights against Hall of Famers, bulked up courtesy of Nigel Benn joining the Hall next year. So Collins has 3 fights against Hall of Famers, including 2 wins, 1 loss and no draw. He defeated 1 individual Hall of Famer, the Dark Destroyer Nigel Benn, and also scored a stoppage win over him. So he has 1 knockout against Hall of Famers individually. And when we go on to the pound for pound slide for Collins, we see he had 4 fights in total, scoring 2 wins, 2 losses and no draws. Collins defeated 1 individual pound for pound fighter. That was the same Nigel Benn, who is now joining the Hall next year at the ceremony, and he also stopped Nigel Benn, so he's beaten 1 pound for pounder and scored stoppage over 1 pound for pounder. So going on to our next slide, okay, which is rated opponents. Steve Collins has full rating information, being a more modern fighter, you know, some of the intermediate divisions like super middleweight, cruiser, Superfly and Lightfly that will be launched over next month as well. They will have full rating information. So Steve Collins had 9 fights against rated opponents, only 9. Okay, going 6 wins, 3 losses and no draws. Collins had 7 fights against top 3 rated fighters with a record of 4 wins, 3 loss, no draw. And he also had 1 fight against a ring champion. That was a defeat. Steve Collins defeated 4 individual rated fighters, and he scored knockouts over 2 of those rated fighters individually. Yeah, I remember I was sat watching the first fight, Mr. James, with Collins and Eubank. Now, there were a big scandal in build-up because Steve Collins said he'd been to see a hypnotherapist. Now, Chris Eubank Sr. was very unhappy about this and basically said, well, that hypnotherapist might have turned him into a wrecking machine, that he was unstoppable and he wouldn't be able to hurt him, and he might have convinced him that he can't be hurt and all this stuff. And I remember when they came to ring, Steve Collins sat on his stool, hood up, sides of his head, just sat there, eyes shut, like he were in a trance. And if you watch the ring walk, when Eubank comes in ring, he's eyeballing him and watching him from afar, and you can just totally tell that Eubank's psyched out. And then Collins admitted after fighting interviews that it were a ruse. They were playing psychological games on Eubank, and it worked a treat. So, on to title fight numbers for Stevie Collins. Okay, Steve Collins had 11 world title fights. He won 9 of those with 2 losses and no draws. Steve Collins also made 7 title defences, and he scored 6 title fight KOs. Now, Collins scored 5 wins against top 10 fighters in title fights. He scored 4 wins against top 3 fighters in title fights and 0 wins against ring champions. Now, in terms of holding wins over champions in title fights, Steve Collins scored 5 wins. He scored 2 wins against a Hall of Famer in title fights and 2 wins against a pound for pounder in title fights. And when we go on to the final slide, a bit of a smaller video, this one, kickstarting super middleweight. There'll be many bigger videos to come over coming weeks with some old schoolers on the main 8 divisions, but I want to get another division launched. I picked super middleweight. I will as well have to every now and then add fighters to these intermediate divisions I've launched, just so they don't stay on one fighter on it all year, because that'll drive me crazy. So in terms of world titles, once Steve Collins captured the WBO middleweight title, he also then captured the WBO super middleweight title. He captured 0 lineal titles and 0 undisputed titles. And Steve Collins once enabled me to catch out someone in a debate. I was debating someone on my old channel, on the old Google Hangouts. I don't know if people remember them. Old Google Hangouts, there were live streams you could have on the old Google Live profiles. So I was on this Google Hangouts Live, and what I used to run on my first channel, and this guy were talking about, fighters, the WBO not being recognised until, what date do they say? Is it October 2006 or something? So I said to him, I was talking, I brought up Steve Collins. I said, what do you think of British super middleweight scene in the 90s into 2000s? And we got talking about it. And then I said, Steve Collins, 2-weight world champion. He goes, yeah, he held titles at middleweight and super middleweight. And I said, got you. I thought you just said WBO weren't recognised till 2006. So according to you, Steve Collins is not a world champion, never was a world champion. I also got him on that debate because he mentioned Joe Calzaghe were a champion for 10 years. I said, no, he wasn't. He was only a champion from when he beat Jeff Lacey, because guess what? The WBO title, according to you, was not a world title before then. No, I'm not saying that. No, he was best in division. No, that's not what you said. You said the WBO was not a world title. It's amazing how people can get twisted. But there's Irish fighter Steve Collins, a fantastic fighter. tough fighter. Okay, should he have fought Calzaghe? Maybe, but that's not my call. That's Steve Collins' call. It's not my place to judge. A fight between Calzaghe and Steve Collins would have been a great battle. Calzaghe obviously was on the come up. He ended up fighting Chris Eubank instead, but that would have been a fantastic battle. I think Calzaghe could have outscored him, but you never know. Collins was a very, very good fighter. But there's the first of my career videos for 2026. Okay, now for coming videos over the coming few weeks, we're going back to old school, and getting many more fighters out. But this year has to be a massive year for career videos. I will do other content around that as well, but it has to be with no graph videos to do. There's going to be more focus on career videos, whereas I was splitting time between career videos and graph videos. So some days in coming year there will be 2 career videos in a day, but I'll just see how I go. But yeah, lots of them coming this year. Steve Collins kicks it off, also opening the super middleweight division. So big shout out to guys in chat. I'll be back tomorrow with another video or 2, so I will see you hopefully then. Let's just get this comment here. Joe RY2XQ, I met him very humble. He said Tony was the best of all of them. James Toney in his prime at the middleweight and super middleweight, yeah, he was an outstanding fighter. I had a Tony glove and asked him to sign it. He said he didn't want to devalue it. Yeah, fantastic story. Yeah, so yeah, everyone in the chat, take care, happy new year. Many more career videos coming in this very busy bumper year. I'm the Boxing Librarian. I'm out for now.